2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this radcast of the Social Club at the End of This World. I'm Jamen Shively, happy to be joined by Nolan, Uncle Frank, and Adam. And we're just recapping a meeting we had just before this one on solar radiation management, where we had Professor Guy McPherson, Dr. Ye Tao at Harvard, and one of his colleagues at Harvard, a researcher, Joachim, from ETH in Switzerland. That's ETH for those who don't speak Swiss German. And we had a few other folks, Michael Gosney and Nolan from the Radish team. And so it was basically a coming together of SRM experts and climate experts and collective intelligence experts to put together for the first time this combined community of SRM expertise and climate expertise and collective intelligence expertise, with the goal of forming a planetary collective intelligence to master and ultimately implement SRM, solar radiation management, at a planetary scale in order to cool the planet in time. In time for what? In time for saving life on Earth. We're on this overheating exponential trajectory driven by greenhouse gas accumulation, but paradoxically, the solution to the problem of planetary overheating driven by greenhouse gas accumulation, the solution is not in drawing down the greenhouse gases. At least the short-term solution is not. The short-term solution rests entirely in solar radiation management, SRM, reflecting a significant enough percentage of the sunlight that's currently hitting the Earth, land and ocean, reflecting a percentage of that back into space so that we restore the energy balance and even tilt the energy balance in favor of cooling. So for example, let's just say hypothetically that it would take 1 million square miles of reflective material to restore the net energy balance to zero, meaning that the amount of energy that's warming the Earth is exactly the amount that the Earth is shedding through infrared as well as reflectivity back into space. By increasing the reflectivity of the planet, we tilt that balance. So imagine 1 million square miles would be required to bring that balance to zero. Even if we brought the balance to zero, we still have the problem that we've melted most of the ice and warmed the oceans and are killing life on Earth with the elevated temperature that we have right now. So even if we didn't change the temperature at all and just were treading water, we're in too deep. So I'm in favor of, instead of just 1 million square miles of reflectivity, make it more like 2 or 3 million square miles of reflectivity, so that we actually essentially apply refrigeration, so to speak, just as a metaphor. It's not actually mechanical refrigeration, but it's reflectivity. But apply enough reflectivity that we essentially refrigerate the planet. We cool the planet. And part of that cooling will involve refreezing ice, refreezing the Arctic sea ice, refreezing Greenland, and cooling the oceans so that we can slow down and hopefully halt the 6th mass extinction. So all that would very notably buy us time. By cooling the planet, we buy ourselves some time, and we can use that time to then solve our root cause problems, such as the carbon economy, our carnivorous diet, overpopulation, excessive land use by humans, where each of us needs to have a big wooden house covered with asphalt and loaded with electronics and refrigeration and air conditioning and all kinds of stuff. Transform our entire set of living arrangements, and with a nod to Adam's soul, transforming our very mode of production and the very goal of our economy from hoarding and accumulation by the individual, right, which is of course omnicidal for the planet, to a much more sustainable and, dare I say, holistically healing configuration of humanity and our economy and our entire set of living arrangements. And in fact, our very purpose here on Earth, going from a purpose of accumulation and aggrandizement of the individual through the destruction of nature to a purpose of healing nature and healing the planet and all of her ecosystems and species so that we can all live and enjoy life indefinitely into the future. So, but again, step one is cooling the planet through solar radiation management, reflecting sunlight back into space. How much? Enough to cool the planet. And with that cooler planet, once we cool our jets, once we cool the planet, then we buy ourselves time to reconfigure across all these other dimensions that I just mentioned in the last 3 minutes, which is extremely interesting stuff, but we'll only have a crack at that if we're able to save life on Earth by cooling the planet. I see we've got some text messages written here that I need to read. Yes, so did anyone from Harvard mention anything they were doing already with respect to SRM? The answer is yes. They showed us what they're doing in terms of a conceptual design of a system of mirrors, ocean-based floating mirrors that can reflect sunlight back into space in the oceans. But it's just a conceptual design. They also noted that there is abundant research in terms of the effect of changing albedo on land and the effect that that has on the energy balance, because there's been plenty of research of, like, let's say there's a city here that has a certain albedo versus the surrounding forests or countryside that has a different albedo. And you can measure, I think Dr. Tao mentioned that, let me get the data here, that even a 0.1 or 10% increase in albedo or reflectivity can result in 2 to 7 degrees centigrade of cooling, just locally. You know, if you, like, I was at the eclipse in Oregon a little over 2 years ago, and when the eclipse happened, yes, suddenly everything became dark, right? But for me, what was even more notable was suddenly everything got cold. It went from being a warm day to a cold day in a matter of minutes. So this reflectivity thing, it's real. If you can shine that light back into space instead of heating up the planet with it, the effects are immediate and very, very real. So we really, truly can cool the planet by reflecting the right amount of sunlight back into space, as opposed to just absorbing, which is what we're doing currently. And so as far as I'm concerned, this is the greatest untold story about how we can, must, and will cool the planet using SRM, solar radiation management, period. It's the greatest untold story. It's the most urgent untold story. And it will result in saving life on Earth, at least in the short term. That's not to say that we won't find other creative ways of destroying life on Earth beyond overheating. So Adam is asking, where would they put the mirrors? In the ocean? Have you looked into space-based SRM? So Dr. Tao at Harvard is in favor of putting the mirrors in the ocean. right? I'm in favor of starting with the deserts and gradually moving the party to the oceans over time. But his big idea is ocean-based SRM. And we talked a bit about other forms of SRM, such as basically putting stuff up into the atmosphere that reflects sunlight back into space. The biggest disadvantages to that are anything that you put up into the atmosphere that essentially dims the sunlight coming towards Earth uniformly. Yes, it dims the amount of sunlight warming the Earth, but in the process, you also take sunlight away from forests and from agriculture, which is a negative side effect. But if you instead do targeted SRM at specific locations like deserts and oceans, then you don't have that negative effect. Also, one big advantage of doing this more targeted approach is you can dial it up and dial it down. Whereas if you dump a bunch of stuff in the atmosphere, all you can really do after that is pray that you've done the right thing. But of course, it's very easy to roll up thin film reflective materials that have already been deployed, or submerge these mirrors once they've been deployed in the ocean. Submerging the mirrors in the ocean is important for, among other things, when there's a storm coming. You don't want them all thrashing around and getting destroyed by the storm, so you submerge them a few meters underwater and literally ride out the storm.
Damon.
Yeah.
So I think it was Denmark that did a study. It was somewhere over there, and they determined that there like 10 million wind-powered seawater pumps could be deployed up there in the Arctic. But they said it would cost, a lot of money, like $3 trillion or something like that. So what about, I've kind of like two questions. Solar radiation management from space, could they not target the Arctic, for one thing? And they wouldn't even need to do that during the winter. And I don't know, it just seems like that the seawater pumps wouldn't hurt the environment. And they wouldn't bother the wildlife, I don't think, too much. And seems like that would be a good way to go.
Yeah, I think all options need to be explored, and what Adam's talking about is using energy generated from wind. We can use that energy to drive these pumps that could spray ocean water up into the atmosphere, creating clouds that would reflect sunlight back into space. So that seems quite viable. We're simply going to need to get into the details, get into the weeds of these different proposed solutions, and figure out which ones make the overall best sense, are overall the best solutions, considering economics, durability, adjustability, maintenance, deployability, and also minimizing the impact on the environment and existing ecosystems and wildlife.
I agree with all your considerings, except for the economic one. I think it's an emergency, and economics shouldn't even be involved. Well, we just need to retool some factories and get these pumps made. That's what I mean. That's what I think. And so again, money is getting in the way, or something's getting in the way, because they're not doing anything, and that's ridiculous. The Arctic is our air conditioner. The seawater pumps, I don't think they spray seawater into the atmosphere. I think they, if it's negative 20 or 30 or something like that up there. You spray water in the air and it freezes by the time it hits the ground. So they spray water over on top of the ice that's already just skimmed over and start building up that ice bank.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I got you, Adam. I got you. Now, would the salt water freeze? Let's say you're spraying salt water into the air. Uncle Frank, maybe you can help answer this one. But my understanding is that salt prevents freezing, right? That's why they put salt on the roads, for example. So if you were to spray seawater with its normal concentration of salt into a super cooled air, like the Arctic air, would that freeze, or would the fresh water start to freeze and form, freshwater crystals within a bath of the larger droplet of salt water, thus increasing the salt concentration in the rest of the water that didn't freeze? Any thoughts on that, Uncle Frank?
Well, no, I really don't know at what temperature, and it probably is a function of the concentration, but I think eventually, it can be frozen. There's no question of that, but I don't know how practical it is. I mean, maybe the temperatures don't fall low enough in the Arctic to freeze it as much as you might like. We'll have to look that up right now, because right now I don't know how much of a factor that would be.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so these are all important details that need to be analyzed and discussed. But getting back to the big picture is we finally have now at our fingertips a way to cool the planet. And it can be summarized in 3 letters: SRM, solar radiation management. Now, to bring it from concept to full-scale planetary implementation in whatever form, we need collective intelligence. We need a bunch of us, a whole planetary community of people of vastly different backgrounds and areas of expertise to come together and figure out the optimal solution, or more likely the optimal mix of solutions to be deployed on land and on the oceans in order. Yeah.
So I just Googled, does saltwater freeze?
Yeah.
And it's, and seawater does freeze. It just freezes at a little bit lower of a temperature. So it's like a couple degrees centigrade lower. So I think it could freeze. I mean, it freezes, and the salt water freezes up there anyway. So it's obvious that it does.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the droplets, because what freezes is the fresh water, and as it freezes, it excludes the salt, right? And so you can imagine if you've got a droplet of airborne salt water, seawater, that starts to freeze, you can imagine a nucleus starting of ice, freshwater ice, freezing and growing within that droplet of salt water, and then the amount of liquid salt water that surrounds that nucleus of freshwater ice would steadily increase in concentration of salt as the freshwater is getting sucked out into the solid phase. But anyway, those are details. The bottom line is we need to test these different methods, analyze them. And to your earlier point about agreeing with every one of the criteria that I mentioned, except for money, I mean, you just have to consider we're just in today's reality, in today's combined government framework, private sector framework, financial framework, Look, Adam, I hate money just as much as you do. Okay, honest to God, I hate it, and I want to see a world without money. But until we get to that point, we're living in a world with money. It's just a reality. And so if Uncle Frank were to write us a check for $10 billion and say, please use this to maximize cooling of the planet through SRM, economics is going to come into play.
Okay, so what you're saying then is that money's killing us.
Well, money is killing us, but
They retooled the factories all over the world for World War I and II, and now we're not doing it. We can't, this is the biggest enemy we've ever faced.
Well, here's the thing. They did retool the factories in World War I and World War II. Uncle Frank was there in World War II when it happened. And what they did, my grandfather, Richard Shively, Uncle Frank's father, worked in Washington, D.C. in, I think it was like procurement, something like that for the war effort. And so we have detailed knowledge of exactly what happened during that time. They didn't just tell the factories, you shall do this. The government said to the factories, the Detroit, auto plants, for example, convert to building tanks, and we will pay you cost plus 5%. Get to work, build the tanks, and we will pay you money. So they didn't dismantle the money system in World War II. They leveraged it. Same thing was happening in Germany. You had Deutschmarks flowing around all over the place, keeping the German war machine going. And so again, I'm no proponent of money. I'm no fan of money, but I'm just saying while we're living in a world where there is money, we might as well use it jiu-jitsu style or Tai Chi style or whatever your, martial art analogy. We might as well leverage it, not as our ideal medium, but as a medium. So if Uncle Frank writes us a check for $10 billion, instead of burning the check, we might use that money to fund specific SRM solutions.
Well, I think money is just, it's definitely a problem. I mean, it's the biggest problem because we could be facing, we could, do something about this, and money's standing in the way. And I have to go because I have another meeting here.
Yeah.
In the meeting minute. So, but I like the idea of refreezing the Arctic with spray. And I just Googled it again. It looks like, I didn't get to look at it very much, but it looks like the water just has to be a little colder. It gets, I think, it should get down to, it says something like, in Fahrenheit, it freezes, salt water freezes at like 28 degrees. So maybe, if it got down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it should be, which it does there, it should be cold enough for spraying salt water to freeze, I would think.
Yeah.
And I like that idea a lot better than reflective thin film reflective material, because the thin film reflective material, it covered the land, and what about all the animals walking on it, and they get tangled up in their feet, and then if you put it over the ocean, you got seals and stuff like that trying to come up, and birds. I mean, they're just numerous. Where are the birds going to eat if it's all covered up with I just don't see how it could possibly work. But I could see how the seawater pumps could work.
Yeah. Let me just address what you're saying, and I know you got to go. So, but we're recording this, so we'll put it up there so you can watch what you missed. But in terms of sea life, so for example, if you take the mirror concept that Dr. Ye Tao at Harvard presented to us today, you've got a whole array of floating mirrors with substantial voids in between the mirrors. So there's plenty of places for the seals to pop their head up and see sunlight and breathe the air and, hunt for fish and everything else. So that can certainly be done in a way that minimizes harmful ecological impact. Likewise, in the desert, where we would likely deploy this are parts of the desert where there is currently zero life at all, right? There are places in deserts around the world where there is literally no life.
No bugs or nothing?
Nothing. I mean, like nothing. Like I think part of the Utah desert has that characteristic. And I point to, I think it's a series called Planet Earth with David Attenborough that was done several years ago by BBC. It's an excellent series, and one whole segment of that series is on the deserts of the world. So I highly recommend watching that, and you will learn that there are deserts in the world where there's like zero life. But even if there were life, even if we went to a place where there's a small amount of life and we put up shading, that might actually be beneficial to life, because you don't necessarily have to blanket everything with reflective material. You can have portions of the land that are covered with reflective material and others that are not, right? And so anyway, there's lots of ways to tweak these solutions to make them eco-friendly. But the biggest eco-friendly thing that we must do one way or another, and Adam, it could be that you've got the best solution with spraying ocean water into the air and freezing it into ice, but one way or another, or more likely a combination of ways, we urgently need to cool the planet to save all of life on Earth, because we're overheating. And go ahead, Adam.
I gotta go.
Okay, great to see you, Adam. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
All right, Nolan, you still there? I know your camera's.
Yeah, I've been listening.
Okay.
I'm actually just laying down right now because I got very tired out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, it's been pretty intense for us the last few days. I'm gonna need a nap myself, partly to celebrate from this awesome meeting we had today with so many great scientists and engineers and writers and thinkers, anyway, which I think we've recapped fairly well. Does anyone have any questions or comments now that we've recapped different solution areas and discussed them?
Jamin, I'd just like to make one question to you. In
Yeah.
talking with that group today, have they really already looked at reflectivity in orbit and have chosen a different route?
You know, I don't think anyone, we didn't specifically talk about reflectivity in orbit, which
I feel like similar lines of logic follow out of the aerosol argument.
Yeah, we did talk about aerosols, but I think that's got so many risks and negatives associated with it, including the fact that it does general dimming, which would take sunlight away from plants and agriculture, forests, etc. I think these other basically land-based and ocean-based mirrors are just the clear choice. But again, all solutions need to be explored within the context of this collective intelligence that we're putting together, so that we can, put all the solutions on the table. If there are solutions for which there are unknowns, okay, if a group wants to go after those and turn the unknowns into knowns, go for it. And then we can really evaluate based on known data rather than just speculation. So we're going to need to do this iterative process of design and analysis, modeling and simulation, prototype building and installation, data collection, feedback loops, etc. We're going to have to go through that whole aforementioned evolutionary process across myriad different possible solutions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I would think that that really has to be looked at carefully then too, because well, it can be controlled better than it on the surface in many ways, and as might have fewer side effects.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it, Uncle Frank. If you do it on the surface of the earth, it can be much better controlled. You only shade those portions of the earth or the ocean that you want, and you can dial them down. If you've overshot for whatever reason, either globally or in a particular region, you can roll it back up. So yeah, it's much better control is afforded by these surface of the earth solutions. And in fact, some of those methods can be used to tweak the weather, literally tweak the weather in beneficial ways. Because of course, you know, at such a large scale, we're talking millions of square miles of reflectivity. That's going to have impacts on the weather, no matter how you slice it. They might as well be positive impacts. And that can come out of both modeling and actual deployment in the real world, and then getting feedback, collecting the data, understanding better how these things are impacting weather on a regional basis, et cetera. So anyway, lots of really great possibilities. You know, and as we look at this holistically, yet another possibility just occurred to me. So imagine we were to do deployment of, you know, these reflective materials at the surface of the ocean. Imagine that we had a system where these could be, you know, unfurled and then furled up again for, you know, like if a storm was coming or something like that and we needed to protect them. Well, imagine that we've got these massive arrays covering, you know, tens of thousands of square miles of ocean, for example. And imagine when it rains on top of these arrays of reflective material, the rainwater itself can be channeled and collected into some sort of a pipe or an open air, you know, channel that fresh water from the rainfall can then be collected, you know, at the nearest, basically at the nearest port, right? Or at the nearest, you know, the nearest land where it can be collected and either channeled somewhere else or stored in massive tanks or whatever. I even had this idea when I was a grad student at MIT back in the day when I was studying hydroclimatology there. I said, hey, what if we used, you know, the tidal forces as to create essentially massive pumping schemes, leveraging the gravity, the relative gravity of the tides, and pump massive quantities of water inland into desert regions where the water could then evaporate, thus forming clouds that could then rain. So it's sort of like a very crude but very large scale form of desalination, right? And generating rainfall. Anyway, just a kooky idea, but this other idea that we've just talked about 2 minutes ago about collecting the fresh water from rainfall and channeling that to store it or use it for agriculture or whatever, that may actually have some practical potential. So, but the big picture here is we're looking at this holistically from a power generation standpoint, water accumulation standpoint, real estate standpoint. You know, in the case of deserts, creating these vast shaded regions, those could be useful for a whole bunch of things. So including greenhouse agriculture, holistic land management, et cetera. So I think there's real opportunity here in looking at this whole system of opportunities holistically. and seeing what are all the benefits that can be derived from this kind of reconfiguration of land and ocean, where the initial impetus might well be for cooling the planet, but hey, while we're at it, we might as well take advantage of this and this.
It looks like
Yeah, go ahead.
now, look, I'm going to have to get into town, so I'm going to drop off now. All right.
Okay, Uncle Frank, great to see you. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your being here. And what a celebration we're having now of this excellent meeting earlier today.
Yeah. I look forward to hearing it.
Wonderful. I'll send you the recording as soon as they send it on to us from Harvard.
Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Frank.
Great to see you again, Frank. Thanks for joining us.
Talk to you later today, Uncle Frank. Have a good day. All right, I'm going to pause recording for a moment. What? Okay, resuming recording. We've got Jamie dialing in from speakerphone, who's just recovering from a surgery. So we're going to once again recap today's meeting, and basically it was just freaking awesome. It was, at first it was, it followed a pretty predefined format in terms of, we're going to cover this topic and then this topic and this topic. So gradually over time, the topics, the different cards on the table were turned over face up. Then we got more and more information. The first part of it was Guy McPherson gave an overview of basically just how bad and how dire the current situation is of planetary overheating. And then we looked at the solutions that are being done today, and basically
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Pardon me. Again, I'm very slow.
Yeah.
So Dr. McPherson gave the thumbnail, the freshman course, and how did the guys and everybody take it? Like, what was their reaction? Were they surprised? Were they in tune with it? How did they react to the hard facts?
Well, first of all, for the most part, they'd already been exposed to the hard facts, which is why they're proponents of SRM in the first place. So
Got it.
Yeah. So it was basically a refresher for all of us, but no one had anything to say against what Guy McPherson was saying.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
And then from there, we looked at, okay, what's the state of solutions today? And basically, and this is my recap of the state of solutions today, which is not how anyone else put it on the call today, but this helps me and hopefully everyone to understand it, is basically, so when a typical person, a typical earthling heard about this global warming problem, well, what's the cause? Well, the cause is greenhouse gases. All right. Well, then the solution must also be greenhouse gases, namely getting rid of them. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yes.
Why is Sally crying? Well, because her brother Johnny is hitting her. Well, Johnny, would you please stop hitting Sally? That should solve the problem, right? I mean, it's just basic logic. But paradoxically, at least where we're at now in 2019, look, if this were 1963, it'd be a different conversation. It'd be like, we've got about 20 years to really cool it on this greenhouse gas bullshit, or we're going to be in real trouble. Well, I got news for you. I know you just came out of an operation, Jamie, but it ain't 1963 no more. It's 2019, and we've got so many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and so few levers and such weak levers for drawing them down. It's basically game over as far as greenhouse gases are concerned, but it's not game over for the planet because we have SRM. And I've got my bag of smart food right here. And I opened that up several times to show, look, we can reflect the sunlight back into space with very inexpensive materials and methods. And so we, and that was basically the gist of the meeting, is we can do this. Now, Dr. Tao at Harvard showed some ocean-based mirror solutions that he's proposing, that he's developed conceptually. And now he's working on the materials aspect of them. But they basically involve glass, like literally flexible glass, that you can make these floating things out of. And imagine whole arrays of these circular, imagine a big circle, 10 meters in diameter or something like that. A big circular glass disc that's made reflective and that floats, and that if a storm is coming, then you submerge these glass mirrors by filling a chamber with seawater. So have, precise mechanical controls that would control that. And he even talked about electric power generation using solar thermal, which you may have heard of. It turns out, you know what I'm talking about when I say solar thermal here? Let me just recap it for people. I did a screen share earlier. I'm going to do a screen share just for people watching this recording. But here up on the screen is this big solar thermal plant near Barstow, California, where you basically have this big circular array of individual mirrors that each one is positioned and angled in such a way that it follows the sun as the sun moves in this big arc across the sky and reflects sunlight to this big central collector, which heats up a certain liquid, which then drives turbines, and you generate power. So that's solar thermal in a high level thumbnail. Okay. Anyway, because we're creating all these mirrors to reflect sunlight back into space, we could take a small percentage of that sunlight and blast it at a solar thermal collector and generate electricity. With what efficiency? And this surprised me. Dr. Tao said that solar thermal is now approaching around 40% efficiency, which is off the charts in terms of solar electric energy generation by any means. So it way leads the pack in terms of efficiency. This could be done on the oceans. It could also be done on land. I talked up the possibilities of doing SRM in the deserts. Dr. Tao talked up doing it in the oceans. And we did a little bit of compare and contrast of different materials. He brought up that the polymer-based materials for metallized film, the polymers can degrade over time. I brought up that if both sides of the film are coated with aluminum atoms of sufficient thickness, that will prevent degradation because sunlight won't get through, oxygen won't get through, and therefore it won't degrade. But anyway, so there's, a nice, very friendly, very healthy debate, you could say, starting to emerge between where do we do this first and with what materials. But that's down in the details. The main point is a point of unanimity. Everyone at the meeting is unanimous in that we must do SRM to cool the planet, to save life on Earth. And but back to the whole drawdown of greenhouse gases thing. So Dr. Tao is going to give his first presentation at an academic conference about this stuff in Pennsylvania in a matter of days or weeks. And he mentioned that he got some pushback from the drawdown people. And it's simply because there's a certain segment of the environmental movement that has simply become attached to this idea that we can do slow, incremental drawdown, replacement of fossil fuel energy with electric, solar and this and that. And, basically we can do this. And with drawdown.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a psychological question, and we don't have the answer, but I'm going to guess that you have a thought on this. Do you think that the drawdown people are using, pardon me, the part of their brain that says we have a lot of time and it's such a, we've talked about how big a problem it is that they don't really see, they're too close to drawdown. They can't back up and see the big picture, that drawdown is something that should be done many steps after SRM. Do they just not see the significantly hugeness of the crisis that's literally unfolding because they're so addicted to the drawdown theory? These are smart people. I remember you went to the thing in Cleveland at the City Club where, what's his name, Mr. Fucking Earth Day, basically was ready to poo-poo SRM because I'm not a scientist, okay? I didn't go to I didn't get the opportunity to go to one of the world's best colleges, but I can clearly see the danger. It's like the train is, the tracks go off a cliff, and I don't know why these guys don't see the danger of trying to fuck around with drawdown, which is something that could happen much later in this process, but is not going to be happening at all until we put the fire out. Why don't they see that?
Yeah, the why don't they see it is a really good question. I once had about an hour and a half long meeting with a technology executive. I won't mention his name because I don't like to talk trash about specific individuals in such a public format. But this was the former CEO and co-founder of a tech company that all of you would recognize. And he made quite a bit of money and is now investing heavily in like solar and all this kind of stuff. So in his case, he was poo-pooing geoengineering in any form because for him, the solution was a carbon tax, and the carbon tax will basically divert everyone's dollars towards the solutions he's investing in. So I think in his case, it's addiction to money and addiction and attachment to his basically winning the game of making even more money through all these solar technologies that he's investing in. So it's money is an addiction. So I really think it's addiction to money. And then for certain academics, it's probably because they've staked their career on drawdown that they're so attached, not so much for money reasons, but for reasons of prestige or job security or whatever else. And also, frankly, there is just this giant collective delusion that the answer is decarbonizing the economy. It's what the 350s say. It's what Extinction Rebellion says. It's what Greta Thunberg says. So there's just this massive chorus. So, Jamie, you and I grew up Catholic. When you walk into a giant Catholic cathedral and there's just everyone singing the same song, you kind of get sucked up into it emotionally. And we're just a very social species. So I think, these primates called human beings are just, for the most part, sucked up into this story that we can suck down the greenhouse gases and live happily ever after.
Well, Jamin, to continue off of that, I think it's a lot easier as an average Joe, so to speak, to say, we need to stand up to these corporations that are large contributors to emissions and basically just demand that our voices be heard and demand that, well, if they're going to emit, then they have to pay for it with a tax. That's a hell of a lot easier than saying we as people of the earth need to unite and create something that hasn't been created before, right? That's a whole nother thing. And frankly, just by the nature of this thing, not a lot of people are going to, or a small number of people are going to realize its necessity in the short term. And we're part of those people. but of course that number is going to grow very rapidly. But it's essentially just a whole new, it's kind of a whole new paradigm, because you could argue that we're working outside of governments and corporations in a way, and we're really just concerned citizens working outside of quote unquote public forums, because there's no progress really being made there. But we're about to make it, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I'll add to that I think the path forward is just as you suggested, Nolan. We just move forward with our trajectory. I don't think it's going to be super productive beyond some healthy debate, kind of like the debate we had at the University of Washington, Jamie. That was very healthy. So some amount of healthy debate between basically the drawdown folks and the SRM folks. Let's have the debate. But let's not get too caught up in that. And also, let's not spend too much time rubbing their noses in the dog shit of their folly, but rather simply move forward with our plans of building a planetary coalition to make SRM happen, even if it's 100% driven by the private sector, private donations, private companies building this stuff out, operating it, maintaining it, and cooling the planet. If it's nothing but private, or some partnership between private sector and, say, local governments, like the state government of Utah with all its desert. Hey, Utah, mind if we use some of that desert to create, reflectivity and solar thermal power generation, and collect water for agriculture purposes and whatnot, and supply the city of Salt Lake City with more fresh water? Imagine they say yes, great, we just go do it. They don't even need to consult with the federal government, because it's not their purview. Where in the Constitution does it say that the federal government gets to regulate land use by the states? It's absurd. So I'm just saying, let's have debates and all that. That's great, but let's not take it too far, because we've got our mission ahead of us, which is to cool the planet, and that should be job one. Just make it happen. And yes, leverage the media. Get on Fox News, get on CNN, and as we've been mentioning, I think we might find ourselves with some really strange bedfellows in the process. Okay, Nolan, you might want to mute your microphone. Where, for example, the oil industry, okay, might really get behind us for two reasons. Number one, we're taking the heat off of greenhouse gases. Number two, you need oil to make the plastic, to make the thin film reflective materials to blanket whole portions of the earth with, right? So we might find that the American Petroleum Institute could be our strongest allies. In fact, I freaking want to call those folks today. Calling Houston. Hello, American Petroleum Institute. Yeah, this is Jamen Shively. Number one, where do I send my check to support you guys? And number two, could I talk with the Committee on Lobbying and Media and Public Brainwashing to get on your agenda about, hey, we've got a solution, and it's not drawdown. It's SRM, and we actually need petroleum for SRM. You know what I'm saying? I kind of feel weird saying this publicly. I might draw some fire, but so be it. But, because we're going to have to build a coalition from essentially nothing, but I think we're going to get a buttload of supporters from a buttload. Look, the other day we were talking with some wealthy folks from Hawaii, I'm not going to name them, who basically said, look, there's a bunch of wealthy folks here who are freaking out over this sea level rise thing. Here we are stranded out in the middle of the Pacific on these islands where, our future is really, really shaky at this point, given all the environmental stuff and the potential for collapse of civilization. A lot of those folks might end up getting beheaded. What do you got? And we said, well, we've got SRM. And they said, well, shoot, we've got money, right? So we could end up with some pretty cool and weird bedfellows in this mission to cool the planet through SRM. So let's really stay open to who we might partner with, right? And, you know, bring on Fox News.
Well, Jamin.
Yes, sir. Yes, Jamie.
Your assessment of strange bedfellows is absolutely 100% correct. And quite honestly, this is the beauty of it. The strange bedfellows projection that you accurately identified is in fact step one in the overall worldwide paradigm shift of how we operate on this planet. That will be the first step of showing the world, look at these fucking organizations that normally have nothing to do with each other and now are pulling in the same direction, because it is in the petroleum industry's best circumstance not to let the earth burn up.
Totally.
And what's going to happen is the strangeness of the bedfellows, which is going to become really uncanny. We're not just going to be walking around with Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion. We're going to be walking around with the enemies who want to say, you know what? We do have to figure this out. So let's get our engineers with your engineers. And that is going to be the beginning of the change of how society works. And that's what's going to draw the interest of everybody in every sector.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. Yeah.
So tell me again, like, so the meeting was just, were they thrilled to have found you?
Everyone looked pretty damn psyched, I must say. Everyone was psyched because here's the thing. In a way, you know, even though there's a couple of Harvard scientists there and, you know, some folks from, like, one of them is from a journalistic organization that has a couple different publications that they put out and whatnot. You know, Michael Gosney was there, Guy McPherson was there. So in a way, we were for the most part kind of some misfits, frankly, because even Dr. Tao's research is something he's pursuing essentially on his own time, on his own nickel, kind of nights and weekends kind of thing. This isn't like an officially sanctioned, funded Harvard project.
Which is ridiculous.
Exactly what happened to Guy McPherson. He started reading peer-reviewed stuff over and over, and outside of his regular duties at the University of Arizona or wherever, he started to collect data that all of a sudden became unignorable. And he said, we can no longer ignore this. And they were like, we don't bring that up because it scares our students. And he said, no, this isn't about scaring students. This is unignorable. So that's exactly, see, the smart people in all the major institutions of the world are all kind of reading the stuff on the weekends going, this is bad.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah.
And they're kind of walking away from their actual mission towards how do we stop this boat from going over a cliff?
Totally. Yeah, and you see, that's what creates the ripeness of this opportunity. Nolan, you were going to say something?
Oh, no. Sorry if I'm a little noisy on this end. I'm making a walk.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway, no, but Jamie, what you're saying, to your point, every smart person, every person who can read or even has access to a freaking television around the world, which is about 99% of the world's population, last time I checked, is saying, whoa, wait, something's happening here. And it ain't cool. In fact, we're overheating and it's killing everything. You know, so everyone's kind of sitting, waiting for the big John F. Kennedy announcement that we're going to do something about this. And we've been waiting for a while now. Now, bam, from Harvard University emerges a story and a press conference that will make the world stand still. A consortium of scientists and engineers led by Harvard scientist Dr. Ye Tao announces the final solution to global warming.
Do you think that, did you broach to them partnering and even dabble with the idea of doing a press conference, or is that not at the phase we're at yet?
I put that shit on the table, but I didn't put it on the table as our action item for next week. But I said that's what we need to build towards. We need to build towards this moment where we let the cat out of the bag and launch this thing as a major press conference.
Wow.
And I told them that I have experience putting together international press conferences with President Vicente Fox.
And that didn't freak them out in any way?
No. In fact, when I first introduced myself at the beginning of the meeting, and you can watch the recording,
I'd love to.
I said, this is me, blah, blah, blah. I've got experience in this area of engineering and business and whatnot. And I also have experience leading global movements. President Vicente Fox and I worked together on legalizing cannabis in the hemisphere and ending the drug war. And as evidence of the success of our efforts, I have received death threats from criminal drug cartels. And everyone smiled at that point. So they get it, this is going to take some heavy hitting, world changing stuff like international press conferences, like coalitions, and this is the beginning of like a smash hit Beatles song from 1965 that's going to make the world stand up and scream. This is the very beginning, right here, right now.
And did you record with everyone's permission? You have it on recorded?
So they recorded it, and at the end of the meeting, I asked permission to share the recording, and we talked about it a bit, and some people shared their, Guy McPherson shared his concern. Hey, what about the intellectual property? Blah, blah, yada, blah, blah. And bottom line, everyone was cool with it because Dr. Tao himself said, look, we need to get to work on this. We need to get the trains rolling, I think, or the wheels turning, right? We don't have time to fuck around and not share this video was essentially the essence of what he said, minus the F-bomb. Right?
That's incredible.
Ain't it? Dude.
No, it's incredible. It's incredible that this happened, that you put this together. This is, Jamin, this is it. This is the snatch block that's going to give us the strength to lift this project. I am so excited that it went so well, and these guys are basically, it sounded like they've been looking for a group like us to help them put the wheels on the bicycle.
They've been looking for us as much as we've been looking for them. And now we found each other. You got the guys with the bicycle frame, and you got the gals with the bicycle wheels, and you got the people with the wrenches and the nuts and bolts. We're putting the wheels on the bicycle, and we're going to get this thing rolling.
And is there a plan for a next conference or summit? Like, did you close it by saying, this is a great meeting, but we need to have them on a regular basis, or how did you wrap it?
I definitely said that. And, we bounced it around a little bit. And I think where we headed out is we're going to have a bi-weekly standing video conference, right? And also, Jamie, I put out there, I said, look, we, Nolan and Michael Gosney and Jamie and I and the rest of the Radish team, and I told them, that you had your surgery today, so they totally understand and wish you all the best, Jamie. But I told them all, I said, look.
So I've got Harvard professors wishing me all the best today.
You've got Harvard professors praying for you.
I have to tell you that's pretty monumental, to be honest. It's very humbling.
Yeah, well, shit, they're humbled by you, Jamie, the tree shredder. So, but listen to this. I said, look, there's all these disparate collective intelligence that have kind of, formed around the world.
Right.
And, dude, this group in England, Jamie, as soon as you're able to watch a video, the very next video you need to see, it's called Rebel Wisdom is the name of the YouTube channel. And they've got a 1 hour, I think it's like 51 minutes or something, introductory video on collective intelligence. They've got their own take, and it's darned impressive. But
it's brilliant. It's extremely well done, super well put together, super articulate guys. It doesn't sound like they have a super clear notion of how collective intelligence is going to be integrated with technology in the near future, which is where we can come in. And Jamin, I talked to Evan, my brother, about it just in the middle of the night last night, actually. And it put a smile on my face to hear that he's already been listening to this channel for a while.
Oh my goodness.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, Jamie, bottom line, this Rebel Wisdom is but one example of a collective intelligence group different from ours, different from Radish, that has a really, really meaningful, really badass approach to collective intelligence, which is at the same time very, very different from ours, but at the same time there's enough overlap, especially in the conversational domain. Jamie, you're gonna love it when you see it. But back to the present topic. Okay, let me bring us back to earth here. Okay, the opportunity is to bring together these disparate collective intelligence groups, bring us all together, and say, okay, you are called to join a larger collective intelligence movement. Okay, set aside your differences. Okay, we're going to set aside our differences, and forget about, ours is going to be the one that wins the battle for the best collective intelligence. Okay, forget all that shit for the moment. Why? Because we need to cool the planet. So we need to come together in a common conversation on cooling the planet and bring together our different Lego sets. Okay, you've got the Death Star Lego set. Nolan, you've got the Red Fire Engine Lego set. Jamin, you've got the Sex Toys Lego set. Okay, bring them all together, and we need to create the ultimate mashup of collective intelligence right now. The Lord of the Rings union between the dwarves and the elves and the hobbits and the humans and the whatevers. We all need to come together now with our different, bow staffs and battle axes and whatever the hell we've got to bring to the battle. We all need to come together and create the ultimate Hungarian goulash of collective intelligence to take on bleeping SRM and cool the planet. And I said that at the meeting in slightly less colorful terms. I don't think I mentioned sex toys, but I did mention we're going to now go out there and bring in these different collective intelligence movements around the world under the common urgent necessity to cool the planet through SRM. How freaking cool is that? So this is the ultimate mashup between the SRM scientists and the collective intelligence, bong suckers. And wow. Yeah. Wow is right. Wow is right. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. And you know what, you guys, we predicted weeks ago that, this is the beginning of this tremendous acceleration that we're doing, right? We don't know where it's going to take us, but we know we're going up really fast. And this is just evidence of that. So we're right on target. This thing is growing probably faster than I would have predicted, frankly. And that's a really good sign.
Well, I have to tell you that I think we've crossed, sorry about my language, I'm kind of loopy. I think we've crossed I think we've crossed the critical critical threshold that we have been trying to cross. Jamin's been trying to cross it for coming up on 6 years. I've been doing it for 2. Nolan's been aware of it since he was 12, but didn't know it was crossable. I believe that we have crossed the most important threshold because somehow, some way, the universe lined us up to get with a group of people that can make a fucking difference. And these are change makers. And we've been looking for change makers from the beginning of this.
That's it. That's it.
I mean, Jamin, we literally have a new paradigm. I mean, we now can start this Harvard project, and with that, re-engage with the Pope and ask them to consider.
Hey, Nolan, Nolan, we need you to. Thanks, Nolan. Go ahead, Jamie. Back to you.
There's so many vectors now because once we get this thing moving, we can go back to the Pope and say, "Hey, this is what we're working on. Any comments? We're not just a couple nutcases in Cleveland Heights anymore. We're actually involved with creating the solution for life on Earth." And maybe they engage, maybe they don't. But what I'm saying is, we've crossed the threshold here. This is the threshold, and you guys. I wasn't there today, but you stepped across it, and you got inside the secret world of the smart people that know what's going on, and we put together people that want to solve it with people that don't think it can be solved. Dr. McPherson and Dr. Rao, everybody. Guess what? It's going to take us all to figure this out.
No, Jamie, you should have seen the Dr. McPherson sex change that happened on video a few hours ago. Okay.
Oh my God.
No. He went from, we're all going to die to, and it's over and we got to enter planetary hospice to literally chop, let's get rolling. We got to get moving.
Amazing. I can't believe it.
Yeah. He pulled down his pants in front of the world and did a sex change on camera.
And guess who did that? Guess who did that for him? Jamen Shively. He's been preaching because what happened, you and I've talked about this, Jamin. What happened to Guy McPherson is he lost the ability to have hope.
Yeah.
And he became a pragmatist. And I understand that because it's easier. But our work, our diligent work has led us here, and now Guy McPherson has hope. I mean, how fucking great is that?
Yeah, and so now we've turned him from a drug dealer of doom to potentially becoming an evangelist for,
yes.
And because he's here on the public video. And in fact, at the end of that meeting, we immediately started the social club. I put out the link, and then I texted Guy McPherson and said, "Guy, join us. We're having the after party." And he joined us for about 15 minutes on the social club.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This whole thing is astonishing, dude.
Absolutely.
I want to say I can't believe it, but I saw it building. I was there for the build out. I knew it was happening, but I still can't believe it. It doesn't make any sense how great this is.
It really doesn't. It's just, it's exceeded our expectations. And everyone on the call was just like, wow, yeah, you could just see it in their faces. Even the guy in Switzerland who, was, his family is asleep. It was late at night there in Switzerland. So he couldn't talk too loud, but you could just see it in his eyes, and his head was starting to rock up and down like, whoa.
Yeah.
These fucking Americans are onto something. And I want in. Right?
I think the whole world's about to have a lot more clarity.
Well, here's the thing. Imagine the Wall Street Journal headline on page 1. Harvard scientists proclaim solution to global warming by 2021. Not 2050, not 2100, not Paris, not Barack Obama, not a bunch of political lip service while the SUVs keep chugging along. No. Final solution to global warming, 2021. Mark your calendars. When people read that, I am telling you, coffee cups throughout Manhattan are going to get overturned and spill on white dresses. Teacups at tea time in London and Hyde Park are going to get overturned, and people are going to say, "What? What? And they're going to read the fucking article. They're going to go to coolkids.com or whatever the hell our website is at that point. Snack bar, schmack bar, gross bar, granola bar. Okay, they're going to go to granolabar.org, and the orgy is going to begin, and they're going to say, "Holy shit!" And they're going to watch, just like some boxing match from 1972. They're going to watch Dr. Drawdown getting his teeth busted out, one blast to the face at a time, by the new SRM Sugar Ray Leonard. Bam, 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 bam. And we have a winner. Bing, bing, bing. We have a new winner. It's called SRM. It's happening now. Get on board. From Hawaiian real estate magnates to popes in Rome, people are lining up to get on board with cooling the planet now. Not maybe, not, let's trash.
Well, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Here's what's going to happen. We launch this thing. We start a working group. We go to Harvard, we do whatever, and Harvard's going to come out with a solution, and a whole bunch of dumbasses are going to talk about drawdown, and the world is going to look at this and make a decision, and the world is going to say, why would we be worrying about drawdown while the Amazon is burning? Common sense, when you explain it to people, common sense will dictate that drawdown is a lower priority than SRM. And that debate is going to be eviscerated very, very quickly. And the drawdown people are going to either shut up or disappear, because there's no room for that monkey shine discussion about can we dig holes and bury carbon or plant more trees. All of those are great ideas. But let's get the house, let's put the fire out first. And then the drawdown people can come to the table and tell us how they got it figured out. And then we'll buy them an extra year of time to figure it out while we're actually doing something.
No, we'll buy them a whole decade. We'll buy them multiple decades.
Yeah. But we're going to go to work now and turn off the heat. And then you guys have the rest of your lives to write letters about drawdown and white papers, and we'll read them, later on. But in the meantime, we're going over to the stove and we're turning that shit down.
Totally. That's it.
All right, listen, I got to go. I'm really getting looped out. So, Jamin, can you text me? Because I really can't think straight, and I can't write. My hands aren't working right. Can you text me? How do I find a copy of the video that you guys did today, if I could see that somehow?
Yeah, they haven't sent it to us yet. I'm sure they will, because we talked about it and we all agreed that not only are we going to see it, but we can share it. So that's all confirmed on the recording, for that matter.
Okay, no worries.
I don't know if they're going to try to edit it first, or I hope they'll just send the thing, because we got, time's a wasting. And as Guy McPherson said in his new voice, let's get moving.
Well, let me just say this about that. I'm very likely going to call back in a couple hours. I can't see. It's like 6 o'clock in Cleveland. I just need to kind of lay down and let this anesthesia wear off. But I need to talk to you guys again if I could today. So I will maybe call in a couple hours, and whatever works. Will you tell me what you guys' availability is?
Yeah, mine's pretty good. I'm gonna probably take a nap and just kind of celebrate a little bit, so yeah, probably a couple hours ought to be great.
Okay.
I work at 6 p.m. tonight.
Okay, Nolan's got work at 6, so that's.
All right, well, Nolan, I'd like a meatball sub with provolone and a small side salad.
We don't serve that, but I can Postmates you some Subway.
Well, how about a big plate of cavatelli with some meat sauce?
All right. Your wish is my command.
I can't wait. Listen, I can't wait to come back out there, and we're all going to go there, and we're going to go there in honor of Nolan, because this is probably the last place he's ever going to have to work like that, because we're going to engage his brain, and he's going to be removed from the necessity of having to work on a schedule. Because my goal is that we sit Nolan down and put some wires in the back of his head and just let him compute.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think so. We can probably talk in about 2 hours, right, Nolan? Because it's at about 2.5 hours from now that you'll need to be heading to work, I think. So, shall we reconvene in a couple hours around 5 p.m. Pacific time? 8 o'clock Eastern.
That works for me.
Let's plan on that. And if Nolan's got to leave early, which he will, that's cool. But I love you guys. I'm sorry I couldn't make it, but my body's falling apart. But I'm so proud that you guys did this. I knew you could handle it. I knew that nothing was above. I mean, Nolan. Let me just ask Nolan this, and then we'll hang up.
Okay, I'm going to pause recording because it's getting a little bit personal for the social club, which is going to be broadcast. So pausing recording now. We'll resume in a minute. Okay, after a pause, we're recording again. We're just kind of wrapping up here because we both got to take a break pretty soon. But I'm just predicting that 1,000 years from now, when history lessons are imparted by whatever means to the people of that era, it'll basically they'll be pre-2019 and post-2019. But 2019 was when everything began to shift radically and insanely quickly, and that was when you've all heard of the blood-brain barrier. Well, this is when we crossed the CI-SRM barrier, merged those two together, and bam, SRM became the catalyst that brought all the CI movements together that were each just kind of measuring their own respective IQ and saying, wow, we're getting smarter, isn't this cool? And then somebody sounded the code red fire alarm, and everyone had to jump to it and get in the game of merging the different flavors of AI, of CI rather, collective intelligence, into this exotic Hungarian goulash of collective intelligence trained on SRM and making that happen. This is the moment everything changed. This is the moment we've been living for. In my case, for over half a century, I've been living for this moment. And as Jamie's ancestors would have said, a lot of ditches had to get dug to get you to where you are today. Think of all the centuries that we were just slopping around in the muck, digging ditches so we could grow potatoes, so we could get to this moment. A lot of ditches had to get dug to get us to where we are today. Ditches dug with cold, wet feet in sloppy, wet, rainy mud. A lot of ditches had to be dug. And here we are. They didn't have Gore-Tex 500 years ago. I hate to break it to you.
You're so privileged.
Oh my God. Well, it's time for noblesse oblige. It's time for us to take this privilege and do something amazing with it, which is exactly what we're doing.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to have to get on another call here in a couple of minutes. All right. Let me pause the record with a freaking celebration. This is why we've done the social club for over 2 years, to get to this moment. This is why everything has happened to get us to this moment where we can finally cool the planet, save life on Earth, live to invent another day, another decade, another century, do all the drawdown stuff. And this is why we're here. So congratulations, all of you watching, all of you participating in whatever capacities. Thank you. And now it's time to just step it up a few notches together and come together. So sign up on radish.org. Here's the call to action. Go to radish.org. On the homepage, there's a place to sign up. You basically apply for membership and join the collective intelligence that's making this all happen. That's the call to action.
Amen.
All right. Any last words, Nolan?
so many more to come.
Yeah, so much more to come. All right. Congratulations and thank you, Nolan. Thank all of you. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Social Club at the End of This World.